You know that feeling right before you're about to jump into a cold pool? That sharp intake of breath, your body bracing for the shock? My wedding day was supposed to be a warm bath, a lifetime of warmth. Instead, just before I walked down the aisle, I was pushed into ice water, and I had to walk down that aisle pretending I wasn't drowning. My name is Clara, and I used to be an event planner. Ironic, isn't it? My entire life was about orchestrating perfect moments for other people. Timelines, seating charts, floral arrangements. I was a master of control. I thought my own wedding, set against the historic moss-draped oaks of Charleston, South Carolina, would be my masterpiece. The man waiting for me at the altar, Mark, was the final, perfect piece of the puzzle. Or so I thought. He was everything a girl from a quiet suburban town in Georgia dreams of. A successful financial analyst from a good family, handsome in that clean-cut, J. Crew catalog kind of way. He had a smile that could disarm a traffic cop, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. We'd been together for 5 years. 5 years of building what I believed was a fortress of love and trust. My maid of honor was Sophia. My Sophia. We'd known each other since kindergarten. We shared everything: scraped knees, first crushes, broken hearts, dreams of the future. She was the sister I never had. When Mark proposed on a trip to Napa Valley, Sophia was the first person I called, screaming with joy. She helped me pick the dress. She planned the bachelorette party in Miami. She held my hand through every moment of stress. She was my rock. That morning, the air in the bridal suite at the old plantation house was thick with the scent of gardenias and hairspray. My dress, a cascade of satin and delicate lace, felt like a second skin. Sophia was flitting around, adjusting my veil, her own lavender bridesmaid dress shimmering as she moved. "You're breathtaking, Clara," she'd whispered, her eyes shining with what I thought were tears of joy for me. How naive I was. The moment of impact came from the most unexpected source: Leo, the assistant photographer. A young kid, maybe 22, with earnest eyes and a passion for capturing the real moments, as he'd put it. He was supposed to be taking candid shots of the groomsmen getting ready in a separate cottage. 15 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, he knocked softly on the suite door. My mother answered, thinking it was the coordinator. Leo looked pale, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He asked to speak to me, alone. My mom and bridesmaids exchanged confused glances. Sophia shot him a look that was sharp, almost hostile. "Can it wait? She's about to get married," she said, her voice a little too high. Something in Leo's desperate gaze made me say, "It's okay, just for a second." They left, closing the heavy oak door behind them. Leo wrung his hands. He held his camera like a shield. "Ma'am, Clara," he stammered. I don't know if I should be doing this. It's not my place, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." My heart started a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. "What is it, Leo?" He swallowed hard and turned the digital screen of his camera towards me. He'd been testing a new telephoto lens, he explained, trying to get a shot of Mark through the cottage window, laughing with his friends. The lens was powerful, a little too powerful. He'd focused on Mark, but the reflection in the window pane behind him was crystal clear. It captured the other side of the room, a small alcove hidden from the main area. And in that reflection, clear as day, were two people, Sophia and Mark. But they weren't talking. Her hands were tangled in his hair, his were on her waist, pulling her close. They were locked in a deep, passionate kiss. A kiss that wasn't for a friend. It was a kiss of familiarity, of shared secrets. It was the kiss of a lover. The world went silent. The scent of gardenias became nauseating. The beautiful, expensive dress felt like a costume for a fool. Leo was still talking, apologizing, saying he'd seen them slip away together earlier. He said he thought he'd misread it, until he saw that. I just stared at the image. The timestamp in the corner read, 11:42 a.m., less than an hour ago. While I was having my makeup done, dreaming of my future husband and my best friend were stealing one last moment. Or maybe it wasn't the last. Maybe it was just the latest. Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality shatters? Not like a glass breaking, but like a mirror cracking into a million tiny pieces, and in every piece, you see a distorted, ugly version of the truth you thought you knew? That was me. Every shared laugh, every "I love you," every knowing glance between me and Sophia, between me and Mark, was now tainted. A lie. My first instinct was to scream, to rip off the veil, tear down the floral arch, and run. But then, a different feeling washed over me. Something cold and hard settled in the pit of my stomach. It was a feeling I hadn't felt since I was a child who'd been wronged on the playground. It was rage, a quiet, calculated rage. I looked at Leo, this poor kid caught in the crossfire. I took a deep breath. "Delete it," I said, my voice steady. "What?" he asked, shocked. "Delete the photo, and any others like it. Forget you ever saw this. You are a professional, and your job is to capture the joy of this day. That's what you will do. Do you understand?" He stared at me, then slowly nodded, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and respect. He deleted the file. He knew I wasn't just giving an order. I was making a pact of silence. As he left, I turned to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were no longer filled with bridal bliss. They were filled with ice. At that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cancel the wedding. Oh no, that would be too easy. That would be letting them off the hook. They wanted a show? I would give them the performance of a lifetime. This wedding was no longer a celebration of love. It was the beginning of my war. I had to walk down that aisle. It was the first step in my plan. My mother knocked. "Clara, honey, it's time." I smoothed down my dress. I picked up my bouquet. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Walking down that aisle was like walking through a dream. The faces of our friends and family were a blur. The only thing in focus was Mark, standing at the altar, a perfect, lying smile on his face. And next to me, holding my bouquet, was Sophia, her eyes glistening with fake tears. I wanted to look at her, to see if she would flinch, but I didn't. I kept my eyes on Mark. When the officiant asked if I, Clara, took Mark to be my lawfully wedded husband, I didn't hesitate. "I do," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and firm. It wasn't a promise of love. It was a promise of retribution. Mark squeezed my hand, whispering, "I love you so much." I just smiled back, a perfect bride playing her part. The reception was a masterclass in deception. I laughed, I danced, I toasted to our future. I even danced with my father, who held me tight and told me he'd never been prouder. The guilt was a physical weight, but the anger was a stronger fuel. Every time I caught Mark's eye or saw Sophia laughing with one of the guests, the fire inside me burned hotter. Our first dance was to a song by Etta James, "At Last." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. As Mark held me, swaying to the music under the twinkling lights, he nuzzled my neck. "Best day of my life," he murmured. "Mine too," I lied, my mind already 1,000 miles away, plotting. The honeymoon was booked for 2 weeks in a luxurious overwater bungalow in Bora Bora, a lover's paradise. For me, it was going to be a prison of my own making, but a necessary one. I needed to be close to him. I needed to maintain the charade. I needed to gather more information. This wasn't just about a kiss anymore. A kiss on our wedding day was not the beginning. It was a symptom of a much deeper disease. I needed to know how far the rot went. The flight to Tahiti was long. I feigned sleep, my head on his shoulder, while my mind raced. I replayed every interaction, every shared trip, every holiday dinner. The signs were there, I realized, like faint writing in invisible ink. The late nights Mark said he was at the office. The times Sophia would cancel our plans at the last minute for a family thing. The inside jokes between them that I was never quite privy to. I had been willfully blind, wrapped up in the fairy tale. Now, my eyes were wide open. Our bungalow was breathtaking. A private deck, a glass floor to watch the fish, a bottle of champagne on ice. Mark was ecstatic. He pulled me into his arms. "Welcome to paradise, Mrs. Miller," he said, kissing me. It felt like being kissed by a snake. I forced a smile. It's perfect. For the next few days, I was the perfect newlywed. We went snorkeling, had couples massages, drank cocktails at sunset. I took pictures. I laughed at his jokes. I acted the part of a woman madly in love. But at night, when he was asleep, snoring softly beside me, my real work began. I needed his phone. It was his digital soul, but it was locked with a passcode and Face ID. The first few nights were fruitless. I'd watch him, my heart pounding, waiting for him to fall into a deep enough sleep. On the fourth night, I got my chance. He'd had a few too many Mai Tais at dinner. He passed out hard. I carefully picked up his phone. I knew Face ID wouldn't work. I tried a few common passcodes. His birthday, my birthday, our anniversary, nothing. Then I remembered something. His mother's birthday. He was a mama's boy after all. 0814. Click. I was in. My hands were shaking. What do you even look for when you're trying to excavate the ruins of your own life? I started with his texts. I typed Sophia's name into the search bar. My breath caught in my throat. There were threads. Not just one. Dozens. Going back years. Most of the recent ones were deleted, but the ones from a few months back told a story. Sophia. Can't stop thinking about last weekend in the city. You're going to get me in trouble. Mark. It's our little secret. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too busy picking out napkin colors. Sophia. I feel so guilty sometimes. She's my best friend. Mark. And I'm the man you should be with. You know that. We just have to be patient. Patient. They were being patient. Waiting for what? For me to marry him, to legally bind my life and my finances to his, before they figured out their next move? The cold fury returned, sharper this time. I scrolled and scrolled, a voyeur to my own betrayal. Pictures, hotel receipts from cities Mark had supposedly visited for work. A whole secret life, running in parallel to mine. But then I found something that made the world tilt on its axis all over again. It wasn't in their texts. It was in his email, an email from a lab, a clinic in downtown Charleston. The subject line was, "Your results are ready." My blood ran cold. I opened it. It was a paternity test report, dated 3 months ago. I scanned the document, my eyes barely able to focus on the clinical text. Participants: Mark Miller, Sophia Hayes. Conclusion: the alleged father, Mark Miller, is not excluded as the biological father of the fetus. Probability of paternity: 99.999%. I had to read it 3 times. Fetus. Paternity. 99.999%. Sophia was pregnant, and the baby was Mark's. I sank down onto the cool tile floor of the bathroom, the phone clutched in my hand. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't. The shock was too profound, a physical force that stole the air from my lungs. A baby. They were having a baby. Our entire 5-year relationship, our engagement, this whole sham of a wedding, and all along, they were creating a life together, a family, at my expense. The timeline clicked into place with horrifying clarity. 3 months ago. That was right after our engagement party. They must have been celebrating. My mind flashed to Sophia, complaining about feeling under the weather for the past couple of months, blaming it on stress. She'd been turning down drinks, claiming she was on a health kick. The lavender bridesmaid dress. It was an empire waist. Clever. It would hide a small bump perfectly. So this was their plan. Mark marries me. I, the stable, successful event planner with a solid business and savings. He secures his financial future, maybe even uses my money to support his new secret family. And Sophia? What was her role? The long-suffering mistress? The waiting in the wings second choice? It was sickening. It was diabolical. Do you know what the worst part was? The feeling of utter stupidity. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? All my skills of observation, all my attention to detail, failed me when it came to the two people I trusted most in the world. But in that bathroom in Bora Bora, sitting on the floor with the wreckage of my life in my hands, something shifted. The grief was still there, a massive, gaping wound, but the rage was crystallizing into something else, a purpose, a cold, clear, diamond-hard purpose. They hadn't just broken my heart. They had tried to ruin my life, to make me an unwitting accomplice in their sick drama. They had underestimated me. They saw me as the good girl, the planner, the reliable, trusting Clara. They were about to meet a side of me they never knew existed. My new plan had to be bigger. It wasn't just about exposing them anymore. It was about dismantling their entire world, piece by piece, just as they had dismantled mine. And I knew exactly what my primary weapon would be. That baby. Their precious secret. It would be their downfall. The rest of the honeymoon was a blur. I was an actress on a stage, playing a role. I put the phone back, erased my digital footprints. I was sweet. I was loving. I was the perfect bride. Mark suspected nothing. He was too arrogant, too comfortable in his lies. When we got back to Charleston, I moved into the beautiful colonial house we'd bought together 6 months prior. I unpacked our wedding gifts. I wrote thank you notes. I played the part of the happy wife. Meanwhile, I was setting the stage for Act 2. My first call was not to a divorce lawyer. Not yet. It was to my financial advisor. My business, Clara's Creations, was a successful LLC. I had a strong client base and a healthy amount of business assets and personal savings. I explained I was considering a strategic restructuring to protect myself from potential future liabilities. A white lie. We worked to move my personal savings into a series of trusts that would be incredibly difficult for anyone else to touch. My next step was the business itself. I contacted a corporate lawyer in Atlanta, someone with no connection to my life in Charleston. I told him I'd received an unsolicited offer to sell my company to an out-of-state investment group. This group, of course, didn't exist. It was a shell corporation we created, registered in Delaware, with a name so generic it was untraceable. Synergy Event Holdings. Over the next 2 months, I went through the motions of selling my life's work. I told Mark, with fake tears in my eyes, that the stress was becoming too much, and I'd gotten an offer I couldn't refuse. I told him the sale would mean we'd have a huge cash influx, but that most of it would have to be reinvested into a new, lower-stress venture I was planning. He was ecstatic. He saw dollar signs. He saw his financial obligations to Sophia getting easier. "That's great, babe," he'd said, hugging me. "Whatever makes you happy. We're a team." The hypocrisy was staggering. The money from the sale was funneled from my business account to the Delaware Shell Corp, and then into the trusts my financial advisor had set up. On paper, it looked like I had sold my business, and my net worth was now mostly tied up in a new, illiquid investment. In reality, I was just hiding my own money from my husband. All this time, I had to keep up appearances with Sophia. This was the hardest part. We'd meet for brunch. She'd ask about the honeymoon. I'd show her pictures. She'd place a hand on her still flat stomach and talk about how happy she was for me. I had to sit there, look her in the eye, and pretend I didn't want to flip the table over. The betrayal from a friend. Somehow, it cut deeper than the one from a lover. He broke my future. She broke my past. One afternoon, we were at a little cafe on King Street. She was picking at a salad. She looked pale. She sighed dramatically. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you." Here it comes, I thought, my heart a cold stone in my chest. I'm pregnant," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I feigned shock. I gasped. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "Oh my God, Sophia! Since when? Who's the father?" She spun a sob story about a brief, regrettable fling with a guy who was out of the picture. She said she was scared and alone. "You're the first person I'm telling," she cried. I didn't know who else to turn to. What do you do when your best friend, who you know is lying to your face, asks for your help? You help them. You draw them closer. You become their biggest supporter. "You're not alone," I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. "I'm here for you. We're here for you. Me and Mark. We'll help you through this, every step of the way." Her relief was palpable. She had no idea she was a fly walking right into my perfectly designed web. For the next 7 months, I was the picture of a supportive best friend. I went with her to OB/GYN appointments. She'd tell Mark she was going with a cousin. I helped her pick out a crib. I listened to her complain about morning sickness. And I watched Mark. I watched him play the part of the concerned friend of the expectant mother. He'd offer to help carry things for her. He'd ask how she was feeling with a look of faux casual concern. They were so proud of their little secret, so sure of their cleverness. The real challenge was getting the final piece of my puzzle. To truly detonate this bomb, I needed more than the prenatal test. That was between them. I needed a postnatal, legally admissible DNA test that included me, one that proved he had fathered a child with another woman while we were married. In many states, this can have a significant impact on divorce proceedings, especially regarding alimony and the division of assets. I needed to prove he had dissipated marital funds on his affair and his secret child. But to do that, I needed the baby's DNA. Sophia's due date was in late April, almost exactly a year after our wedding. She gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Liam. Mark called me from the hospital waiting room. "Hey, babe. Just wanted to let you know Sophia's baby arrived. A healthy boy. I thought we could visit her tomorrow, bring her some flowers." His voice was brimming with an excitement he was trying to suppress. "Of course," I said. "That's wonderful news." The next day, we walked into her hospital room. She was glowing, holding this tiny, swaddled infant. Mark was practically vibrating with barely concealed pride. I brought a huge gift basket, diapers, wipes, clothes, and one other thing, a top-of-the-line silver-plated baby rattle from Tiffany & Co. I cooed over the baby. "He's beautiful, Sophia. He has your eyes." I looked at Mark. "Don't you think he looks a little like you, Mark? Around the mouth?" Mark just chuckled nervously. Sophia shot me a quick, unreadable look. I handed her the rattle. "This is for Liam," I said. While she was distracted, admiring it, the baby started to fuss. He'd been sucking on a pacifier. I gently took the pacifier from his mouth to soothe him. "Here, let me," I said, rocking him for a moment. In that moment, with my back turned to them, I slipped the pacifier into a small, sterile plastic bag I had concealed in my purse. I then pulled out a new, clean pacifier from the gift basket. "He probably wants a fresh one," I said, popping it into his mouth. He quieted down instantly. No one noticed the switch. I had my sample, but I needed 2 more. Later that week, when Mark was in the shower, I went into our bathroom. I took his toothbrush, the one he'd used that morning, and snipped off the bristles with nail clippers, placing them in another small bag. That was Mark's sample. The next day, I dropped by Sophia's apartment to bring her a lasagna. While she was in the kitchen, I went into her bathroom, claiming I needed to use it. Her hairbrush was on the counter. A few strands of her hair were all I needed. I had all 3. That afternoon, I overnighted the package to a DNA lab in a different state, one known for its discretion and legally admissible results. The instructions were clear: a standard paternity test between Mark, putative father, and Liam, child, and a maternity test between Sophia, putative mother, and Liam, just to be thorough. The results would be emailed to a new, anonymous address I had created. The waiting began. It was the longest week of my life. During that week, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I told Sophia and Mark that we needed to throw her a proper welcome home Liam party. Not just a small get-together, a real party, a celebration. You've been through so much, I told Sophia. You deserve to be celebrated, and everyone is dying to meet Liam. Mark loved the idea. It was another chance for him to play the benevolent, supportive friend. He even offered to chip in a significant amount of money for it. Let's do it at our place, he said. We have the big backyard. Perfect. I went into full event planner mode. I sent out beautiful, custom-printed invitations to over 100 people, all their friends, their families, Mark's colleagues from his prestigious firm, my family, everyone. The theme was, A Star is Born. I hired caterers, a bartender, even a string quartet. The centerpiece of the party, I announced, would be a special video presentation I was putting together, a tribute to Sophia and her new journey into motherhood. They thought it was a wonderful idea. The day of the party was a perfect spring day in Charleston. The sun was shining. The garden was in full bloom. People started to arrive, laughing, drinking champagne, cooing over baby Liam, who was being passed around by his proud aunties and uncles. Mark was the gracious host, clapping men on the back, charming everyone. Sophia looked radiant, soaking in the attention. They were the king and queen of their own little lie, and I had built them the castle. At 4 p.m., I gathered everyone in the backyard. A large projector screen was set up. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our dear Sophia and the arrival of her beautiful son, Liam, I said into a microphone, my voice bright and cheerful. Sophia, you've been my best friend for my entire life, and seeing you become a mother is one of the greatest joys. I've put together a little something to show how much we all love you. Everyone clapped. Sophia dabbed at her eyes. Mark put a proud, proprietary arm around her shoulder. He caught my eye and gave me a little wink, as if to say, "Thanks for doing this." I just smiled. I clicked the remote. The video started. The first few minutes were exactly what they expected. A slideshow of photos of me and Sophia as kids, at birthday parties, on vacation, at our high school graduation. Sentimental music played. People murmured, "Aw." Then, the music stopped. Abruptly. The screen went black for a second. And then, a new image appeared. It was the photo Leo had taken. The reflection in the window. The kiss. A collective gasp went through the crowd. I could see people turning to each other, whispering. Mark's face went white. Sophia looked like she'd been struck by lightning. But I was just getting started. The screen changed again. This time, it was a screenshot of one of their text messages. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too busy picking out napkin colors. Another screenshot. And another. The damning evidence of their long-running affair, displayed for everyone they knew to see. The backyard was silent now, a thick, uncomfortable silence. Mark was staring at me, his mouth open, a look of pure horror on his face. Sophia was shaking, her hand covering her mouth. "Now," I said, my voice no longer cheerful but cold and clear. "You might think this is a story about a simple affair, but it's a little more complicated than that." The screen changed one last time. It wasn't a photo. It was a PDF document, blown up to fill the entire screen. The letterhead was clearly visible. Advanced Genetic Diagnostics, Inc. The title read, Paternity Test Results. I let them read it. I let the words sink in for the crowd. Participant, putative father, Mark A. Miller, participant, child, Liam Hayes. And then, the conclusion, in big, bold letters. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Mark A. Miller is the biological father. The silence was broken by a woman's shriek. It was Mark's mother. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. All eyes went from the screen to Mark and Sophia, who were frozen in place, exposed under the bright afternoon sun. I picked up the microphone again. "So, I'd like to propose a new toast," I said, my voice ringing with a terrible calm. Not to Sophia, the brave single mother, but to Sophia and Mark, the proud new parents, and to their son, Liam Miller. I turned to my husband. "Congratulations, Mark. It's a boy. I believe this is where you're supposed to hand out cigars." That's when the chaos erupted. People were yelling. Mark's father was storming towards him. Sophia's parents were pulling her away, their faces etched with shame. I just stood there and watched the world I had so carefully constructed for them burn to the ground. It was a perfect event, my masterpiece. Mark lunged towards me, his face contorted with rage. "You psycho!" he screamed. "You ruined my life!" "No, Mark," I said, stepping back calmly. "You ruined my life. I just handed you the bill." I took off my wedding ring, the one he'd placed on my finger with false promises, and dropped it into his champagne glass. It made a soft plink. Then I turned around and walked back into the house, leaving them to the judgment of their friends and family. My lawyer served him with divorce papers the very next morning. The fallout was spectacular. Mark was fired from his high-powered firm within a week. A morals clause in his contract took care of that. His family, a pillar of the Charleston community, was mortified and effectively disowned him. Sophia became a social pariah overnight. The beautiful life they had planned to build on the foundation of my trust had crumbled into dust. Because of the evidence of adultery and the careful financial structuring I'd done, the divorce was surprisingly swift. He tried to come after my new investments, but my lawyer, Evelyn, was a shark. She proved he'd spent marital assets on his affair, and he ended up with almost nothing. He had to pay child support for a child he could barely afford, and last I heard, he was living in a sad little apartment in North Charleston, working some dead-end sales job. And me? I walked away. I left Charleston, the city of my broken dreams. I dissolved the Shell Corporation and reclaimed my money. I traveled for a while. I went to Italy. I learned to cook. I learned to be alone again. I learned that the end of a fairy tale isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's a liberation. I'm not an event planner anymore. I realized I spent too much of my life trying to control things. Now, I'm learning to let go. But I'll never regret what I did. They tried to make me a fool in my own story. So I rewrote the ending. And in my version, the princess doesn't just walk away. She burns the castle down.